Noah was only 14 when his Uncle Hank barked at him to get lost. No heads up, no parting words, just a slurred growl and a finger jabbing toward the door. Snow whipped sideways that night, thick and heavy, the kind that muffled every sound and wiped footprints clean in minutes. Noah stood on the porch with his beat-up backpack, one trembling hand gripping Max's collar. Max, a scruffy brown mutt with cloudy eyes and a bent ear, pressed against him like he knew exactly what was going down. No plan, no destination. They just started walking. The road leading out of town lay dark and empty, flanked by frozen trees and crumbling sheds. Noah's boots were too thin for the biting cold. Every step sent needles up his legs. Max limped along beside him, slipping on ice patches, breath coming in quick, anxious puffs. After an hour of trudging, Noah spotted an old house hugging the edge of the woods. Boards nailed over the windows, porch drooping like an old man's back. No lights, no smoke, no sound. But it offered something else. Clearance underneath, the whole place lifted on weathered wooden beams. Wind screamed through the open gap below. Yet when Noah crawled under, he felt something strange. It was warmer. Not warm, just less brutal. Outside, the snow stung his cheeks like fire. Under the house, the air hung still and dull, as if the cold had forgotten to show up. Max curled up in the dirt right away, tail tucked, body snug against Noah's leg. Noah tugged his jacket tighter and listened. Overhead, floorboards groaned in the gusts. Beneath him, the ground was hard-packed but not frozen through. He watched his breath drift like smoke in front of his face. "Guess this is home for tonight," he whispered. They stayed right there through the long night. The cold seeped in slowly, not the vicious way it did outside. Max slept. Noah didn't. Moonlight filtered through cracked boards, and he noticed something that mattered. Whenever the wind eased off, the space felt warmer again. Come morning, his stomach knotted with hunger. He rummaged in his bag and found one smashed granola bar. He broke it in two, sliding the bigger half to Max. While Max chewed, Noah rolled an empty can that had tumbled out. It clinked across the dirt and came to rest near the center. That's when he saw it. Right under the heart of the house, the soil was dry. The air felt different there, almost sheltered. Noah pressed his palm to the earth. Not warm, but not lifeless either. He sat there a long while, staring up at the low, dusty ceiling of beams. He remembered something Mr. Ray, his old science teacher, had once said. Heat moves. It spreads. It doesn't just rise, it leaks. That house above had once been a home. It had known fires, families, warmth. What if, he murmured. Max lifted his head. What if this isn't just somewhere to hide? Noah said aloud. What if it could be more? The idea scared him. He was just a kid. A runaway. A nobody with a dog and empty pockets. But Max was shivering again, and something hard and stubborn stirred inside Noah's chest. He wasn't going to freeze here. He wasn't going to let Max freeze either. Under that broken-down house, in the dead of winter silence, an idea took root. Not a miracle, not a fantasy, a long-shot, desperate plan. And for the first time since Hank threw him out, Noah felt something he hadn't felt all night. Hope. By morning, fresh snow had buried their tracks. Noah crawled out stiff and sore, fingers numb, knees caked in mud. Max followed, shaking dirt from his coat and sneezing like he'd caught a cold from the ground itself. They spent the day scavenging. Noah headed into town with Max hugging his leg, rummaging through trash cans behind the grocery store, hunting for returnable bottles, anything that might bring in a few bucks. People stared. Some folks whispered behind his back. At the gas station, a guy in a grease-stained cap muttered, "Kids ought to be in school," and shook his head like Noah was already a lost cause. Noah just kept his eyes forward and walked on. That night, tucked back under the house, he couldn't shake the memory of that odd warmth. It clung to him like wood smoke on his jacket. He reached up and pressed his palm against the rough floorboards overhead. Cold timber, sure, but not ice hard. Heat moves, he reminded himself. He knew that much from Mr. Ray's class. 2 days later, he slipped into the public library, mostly to thaw out. Flipping through a dusty rack, he landed on an old home repair magazine. The cover pictured a basic greenhouse patched together from scrap lumber and salvaged window panes. He stared at the photo until his eyes burned. A greenhouse. Under a house. The thought hit him like a bad joke the second it formed. He could already picture telling someone and hearing them snort. A runaway kid trying to grow a garden in the dead of winter? With what? A pocket knife and pocket change? Still, the idea wouldn't let go. Later, in a thrift shop down on Main Street, he found a beat-up farm catalog from last year. Tucked between the pages was an ad for affordable cold-frame windows, wooden boxes with glass lids designed to kickstart seedlings in early spring. The price tag was way out of reach. That night, Noah counted his coins under the faint glow of a streetlight. $8.37. Not even in the ballpark. So he went to work. He shoveled snow for May, the old widow with the bad knee who could barely make it down her walk. He stacked firewood for Jed, the guy who always reeked of gasoline and yesterday's regrets. He scrubbed the diner kitchen for Lou, trading elbow grease for leftover soup and a handful of crumpled bills. Max waited outside every time, curled tight against the warm air vents, tail thumping hard against the concrete whenever Noah stepped back out. After a solid week of hustling, he finally had enough. When he slid the cash across the feed store counter, Boone raised an eyebrow. "What are you up to, kid? Planting Christmas trees?" "Something like that," Noah said, keeping his voice steady. The windows showed up 3 days later in a battered cardboard box. One pane was cracked clean through. The rest had made it. That night he hauled them under the abandoned house, heart hammering like he was pulling off a heist, even though every dime was honest. Sleep didn't come easy. His brain kept racing, angle the glass to catch the low sun, block the wind just right, trap whatever heat leaked down from above. Maybe, just maybe. The next morning, while he was wrestling one frame upright and lashing it to a beam with a scrap of rope, Cole and Wes strolled by and stopped dead. "What the heck is that?" one of them called. Noah didn't answer. The other one laughed. "Dude's building a fish tank or something." They wandered off, still snickering. Heat flooded Noah's face, but he didn't quit. He kept tweaking the frame, hands shaking from cold and fury. Max let out one sharp, protective bark. "I know," Noah muttered. "Sounds crazy." He stepped back and eyed what he'd managed so far. Crooked, wobbly, barely holding together. But it stopped the wind dead. And under the glass, the dirt suddenly looked less lifeless. He pressed his hand to the soil again. Not warm, not yet, but not hopeless either. He sat there with Max pressed against his side, staring at the rough little wall of glass he'd built. It wasn't a real house, it wasn't magic, but it was the first thing he'd ever made for himself. And for the first time since Hank kicked him out, Noah didn't feel like he was just hanging on. He felt like he was fighting back. The first real blizzard rolled in the night Noah tried to finish sealing his glass wall. Wind hammered the old house like it was trying to break in. Under the floorboards, cold squeezed through every crack. Noah worked by the weak beam of a dollar store flashlight. His breath exploded in white clouds while Max huddled close, curled into a tight knot of fur and ribs. The frames didn't line up the way he'd pictured. One was too wide. Another tilted no matter how hard he jammed it in place. The rope he'd knotted around the beam kept working loose. Every gust made the glass rattle like it was seconds from exploding. "Come on," Noah whispered through clenched teeth. "Not now." He braced one frame with his shoulder and tried to drive a nail with fingers gone numb. His grip slipped. The nail bent sideways. The hammer smashed his thumb. Noah clamped his teeth down on his jacket sleeve to muffle the curse so Max wouldn't hear him cry out. For a long heartbeat, he just sat frozen in the dirt, blinking back tears, fire racing up his arm. The cold was taking over. His arms moved like they were stuck in molasses. His mind felt thick, heavy, defeated. "This is dumb," he told himself. Should have kept moving, found some other hole to crawl into, kept his head down. Max lifted his head and gently bumped Noah's knee with his nose. Noah let out a shaky, exhausted chuckle. Yeah, I'm listening, boy." He tried again. This time slower, more careful. Instead of muscling the frame perfectly straight, he tilted it deliberately toward the pale winter sun. He jammed scrap boards between the beams for support and cinched everything tight with rusty wire he'd yanked from an old fence line. It looked rough as sin, but it held. By dawn, 3 frames stood upright. Outside, the wind still screamed, but underneath the house, the world had shifted. The space felt hushed. The air hung heavier, captured. Noah rocked back on his heels and lifted his cheap little thermometer, the one he'd snagged for $1 at a yard sale. Outside, 9 degrees Fahrenheit. Under the glass, 39. He stared at the numbers like they might vanish if he blinked. "That's above freezing," he said aloud, voice barely above a whisper. No whoop of joy, no fist pump. He just sat there, stunned, the way a drowning man suddenly realizes he's still drawing breath. Over the next few days, Noah kept at it, tweaking and building. He shoveled snow and dirt along the bottom edges of the glass to seal out drafts. He scavenged empty soda bottles, filled them with dark water, and lined them against the back wall, hoping they'd soak up daytime sun and give off heat after dark. Out behind an abandoned barn on the edge of town, he found a heap of rotting hay mixed with old horse manure. It stank to high heaven. Didn't matter. He loaded it into a busted sled and dragged it home one painful step at a time. Then he spread it under the topsoil, remembering a random fact he'd read somewhere about composting heat. That first night after he finished, the temperature crept up again. 42 degrees. Then 45. Noah lay awake, listening to Max's steady breathing, terrified it would plunge again. Terrified the glass would pop. Terrified he was kidding himself. But morning arrived, and the thermometer still sat steady just above 40. That was the moment he let himself believe. From the bottom of his backpack, he pulled a small envelope of seeds, bought with his last 2 crumpled dollars. Lettuce, radishes, spinach, the cheapest packets on the rack. He nailed together narrow planting boxes from scrap lumber and packed them with the richest creek-bed soil he could scrape together. His hands trembled as he poked the tiny seeds into the dark earth. "Don't die on me," he whispered. "Please don't die." Max watched from the corner, ears perked. Noah leaned back and stared at the black soil under the glass. Nothing happened. Not yet. But deep under the frozen world, beneath a sagging house and a rickety wall of scavenged glass, something had quietly started. Not food. Not safety. Not yet. Just the possibility. For the first few days, everything stayed the same. Noah checked the beds every morning and every night, crouching low with his flashlight like a doctor listening for a pulse. The soil remained dark, motionless. No green, No sign of life. Just neat rows of silent dirt. He fought down the panic. He heated water on his little camp stove, let it cool, and poured it gently over the beds. He wiped condensation and frost from the inside of the glass with his sleeve. He tilted the frames whenever the sun moved, chasing every weak ray of winter light. Some nights the cold dipped harder than he could stand. When it did, he bundled himself and Max together under their thin blankets and slept right there beneath the glass, sharing body heat like it could make a difference. He never griped. He just pressed in closer. On the 8th morning, something changed. Noah felt it before he could name it. A fragile thread of green, no thicker than a whisper, pushing up through the soil in the first box. He leaned in. Then another. And another. Noah whispered, "Max! Max, look!" Max thumped his tail hard against the dirt like he'd just heard the greatest secret in the world, even though he had no clue what it meant. By noon, the tiny sprouts stood in straight little rows. Lettuce first, then radishes pushing through. They looked pale and paper-thin, like they weren't sure the world was safe enough to trust yet. Noah's throat closed up tight. He hadn't just scraped together shelter. He'd coaxed life out of frozen ground. He started a notebook that same day, jotting down the temperature and measuring how much taller the plants grew every single morning. When the sun broke through, the little space underneath felt almost cozy. When clouds rolled in heavy and gray, the air seemed to hold its breath right along with him. One afternoon, Grace, the kind woman from town, spotted him lugging a cracked bucket of creek water back toward the house. She called out, "What in the world are you up to under there, honey?" "Growing food," Noah answered simply. She blinked hard. "In winter?" He hesitated, then gave a small nod. "Yeah." She followed him anyway. When she ducked low and saw the rows of green pushing up through the dirt, she didn't crack a smile or fire off questions. She just stood there a second, then breathed out, "Lord have mercy, you really pulled it off." Word got around fast after that. Boone from the feed store came by to see for himself. Then Cole and Wes, the same two who'd laughed at him before, showed up and just stood there staring at the green against all that white snow. One of them finally muttered, "That's actually working." Noah didn't feel proud. He felt watchful. Every night he lay awake running worst-case scenarios. Glass cracking in the cold, soil going moldy, winter finally winning the fight. But the plants didn't care about his fears. The lettuce unfurled into soft, broad leaves. Radishes shoved up sturdy stems. Spinach deepened to a rich, defiant green. One morning the leaves looked big enough. Noah pinched off a few, rinsed them in the icy creek, and offered the first tiny bite to Max. Just a taste. Then he ate the rest himself. They didn't taste fancy. They tasted like everything. Fresh. Cold. Real. Grace came back a few days later with an old wool blanket tucked inside a sack of dried beans. Someone, nobody said who, dropped off a pile of scrap lumber right near the entrance. Another person left a spare window frame propped against the side of the house. Noah didn't ask questions. He just kept planting. Under that sagging old place, a small green world was taking shape. Quiet, stubborn, alive. Outside, snow still blanketed everything. Inside, something bigger was shifting, not just the soil. Noah felt it in his bones, too. He wasn't hiding anymore. He wasn't barely hanging on. People were starting to notice him. And for the first time in forever, Noah let himself wonder what might happen when winter finally let go. And he was still on his feet. By the time March loosened winter's stranglehold, the space under the abandoned house didn't look like a hideout anymore. It looked like a living room. Rows of lettuce brushed Noah's knees when he knelt to water. Radish leaves spread out bold and wide. The spinach held a deep, unyielding green. Every morning sunlight slanted through the angled glass and drew soft golden stripes across the dirt floor. Noah harvested with care, snipping only what the plants could give without hurting. He rinsed the leaves in creek water and shared whenever he could. Grace returned with a small sack of flour. Boone left a bag of nails by the entrance without a word. Someone else dropped off another window frame and leaned it against the wall. Nobody laughed anymore. One afternoon, Boone, the same guy who'd once raised an eyebrow at Noah's handful of cash, stood under the glass with his hands on his hips. "You know," he said slowly, "folks would pay good money for setups like this." Noah shrugged. "I just didn't want us to freeze." Boone nodded, slow and thoughtful. "Still, you built something that works." A small local paper picked up the story and ran a short piece. Local teen beats winter with DIY greenhouse. It skipped the nights Noah huddled shivering next to Max just to stay alive. It left out the constant dread of a single pane cracking or the seeds refusing to sprout. All it showed was one clean photo. Bright green leaves stark against the white snow. Pretty soon, folks started showing up with questions. "How'd you keep it from freezing solid?" "What kind of seeds did you plant?" "Think that setup would work under my crawl space too?" Noah answered the best he could, talking about trapping heat from the house above, sealing out the wind, letting the low sun do the heavy lifting. He wasn't trying to play professor, but the words came steady and sure. He'd earned every bit of what he knew the hard way. Spring arrived in fits and starts. Snow turned to slush, and then thick mud. Birds showed up again, filling the bare trees with song. By the time the rest of town got their outdoor plots in the ground, Noah was already harvesting weeks ahead. One quiet evening he sat under the glass, with Max stretched out beside him, watching the sky bruise purple through the gaps in the floorboards overhead. "We made it," he said, voice soft. Max thumped his tail once, slow and content. Noah's mind drifted back to that first brutal night, crawling under the house with nothing but a backpack and a scared dog at his side. He remembered how the whole world had felt like ice, how tiny and invisible he'd seemed in it. Now soft lettuce leaves brushed his arms when he moved. Warm air rose gently from the dark soil. A steady, quiet feeling settled in his chest. He mattered here. He hadn't just grown food. He'd grown roots. A place that felt like his. And maybe, just maybe, a real shot at something better down the road. Noah glanced down at Max and cracked a small smile. "Guess we didn't just survive winter, buddy," he said. "We turned it inside out." What would you have done in Noah's boots? Kept walking through the snow, head down? Or stopped right there and started building something out of nothing? Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. We appreciate you more than you think. If this tale stirred something deep inside, we invite you to remain part of this frontier of memories. More true stories of honor, compassion, and destiny are waiting for you here. Subscribe, share, comment. And thank you for riding with us today. Aviso legal / disclaimer. Our content is designed for artistic and entertainment purposes and may reinterpret historical themes using fictional touches. We apply AI tools thoughtfully, only to support production, while keeping human supervision over editing, emotional tone, and narrative coherence. We always comply with regulatory guidelines for AI-based media and avoid deepfake practices or identity manipulation. All supporting components remain legally sourced. Please ask for authorization before sharing or adapting any segment. Your respect makes it possible for us to continue telling meaningful stories.